Hey Faithers, happy Monday and welcome to episode 114. We have officially ended our social work month. I was going to say series, but we're still going to talk about social work in general because, excuse me, because in March I had first of all, I didn't start celebrating social work month until like day 10. Then I went through like 2 weeks of where I was just out of it, and so I still want to do 31 days of social work. So if you're following me on social media, I'm definitely still doing that. We're going to go ahead and go into April, and part of the reason that I'm okay with that is because April starts my grief season anyway. And so with that, ooh, I be really trying to get comfortable before I turn on the camera, and I just never do. But anyways, um, but so we'll be going into that. So April is my grief season. We'll talk a little bit about that in the topic of the day. But yeah, it's Monday. I'm actually recording this on Friday, the Friday before this episode releases, and yeah, I just have had a lot of reflections. I actually want to take myself to breakfast today. I have a doctor's appointment later and I really need to be hydrated. But I think I'm gonna go ahead and record, and I'm gonna set the boundary with myself that I'm not gonna edit. I could do that after the doctor's appointment. I'm just gonna record, and I'm gonna take myself to breakfast because it's this place I've been craving, and I want it, and it's Friday, and I'm pretty sure I got paid today, so. Yeah, so that is how this episode is going to go. So today's episode is titled The Realities Through Grief. And so I really just want to talk about some of the things that I've been grieving as I've given myself permission to process and to grieve. And as I've learned more about grief, like there's so much more research and things coming out, and how I really want to be part of like this grief research. So I'm definitely going to tap into that. But anyways, yeah, so yeah, that's the intro to episode 114. So I will catch you in the icebreaker. All right, welcome to episode 114's icebreaker. Today I have two decks of cards. I have the butterfly affirmation, because I just feel like I'm going through a transformation right now, like a really big transition. And I'm not gonna lie, like I'm having hard time, and it's positive. It's not anything good. I feel like the last couple of years, especially if you've been watching this, it's been very down and just me trying to figure out myself. And now I'm at the point where I figured out myself, but these transitions, oh my God. And so I like to talk about that because we don't talk enough about like how healing actually feels. Like a lot of times, like, oh, just love yourself, which is great. Like I do love myself. I'm great company. However, like we don't talk about the realities of transitioning and changing and just being accepting. Also, too, we don't talk enough about like how different personalities take on different things, and how just because you're strong enough to like be like fuck it, I'm good, doesn't mean the next person. Like I'm a processor. Like I have to process things. I can't just like up and go to the next thing. And I even talk about that in my schedule. Like I can't have things back to back to back to back. I need a little bit of time to process. And that goes for my life too. Like I can't just like in one thing and start the next thing. Like there has to be a process. Not saying I'm not open to like trying something new, but I know how I am and I know how I act. And I think like that's the beauty of actually knowing yourself and actually knowing how you process. And I think about that even in dating. Like I guess the most recent man I tried to date, and we were trying to like just figure out like dates, like dating and stuff like that, the basics. And one of the things was like he was a spontaneous dater, and I was like, well, I need it planned out. And to this day, I feel like he blames me that we didn't work out because he felt like I just wasn't. I don't know, but anyways, I say that to say, like, in that situation, I had to, like, tell him, like, hey, this is how I process, okay? This is what is going to work for me. I cannot do spontaneous because it does not work. And, like, even getting as deep with him, be like, okay, so you're not getting it, so let me break it down this way. I have to protect my nervous system at all times. If I'm constantly doing spontaneous things, that means that my nervous system is not going to be calm and I'm not going to be the best person that I know I could be. And so that was hard to get, but also too, in that situation, I learned that we just didn't work, and that was okay. And that was the first time in a long time and ever where I was like, oh my gosh, like we don't work, and I'm okay with that. Like I don't feel bad about it. I don't. And some of y'all might, because some of y'all too perfect for me, but some of y'all might be like, oh well, that's how you should always be. No, let's talk about the real stuff. Like let's talk about how, yeah, that's how we should be, but are we? Like let's talk about like, okay, well this is something new for me. So anyways, so I just feel like I'm going through a lot of transitions. I picked the butterfly affirmations first, and I didn't shuffle, but these cards look like they're speaking to me. um Nothing is impossible for the heart. Love will always find a way. I soothe away stress and anxiety by choosing to do things that help me relax. I give myself permission to switch off my mind and have some fun. My patience is being rewarded. My turn will come. I listen to the intuitive wisdom of my own feelings. I am guided from within. Okay, I'm going to do one more. It is safe for me to explore unknown worlds and try new things. You know what? We're not going to do the second deck because that was a lot. I feel like that was what I needed. So we aren't going to do the second deck. Okay. It is safe for me to explore unknown worlds and try new things. I, excuse me. Okay. So I think I've been tapping into worlds that I want to be in. And I think like for so long, I've like waited on people and wanted people to experience like everything I was experiencing, and now I'm in this season of like I'm just gonna do it. And so looking into different worlds that I've always been interested in, such as like the research world, single events. I can't really think of much off the top of my head right now, but yeah, like just exploring new things and being open to new things, um and just not being scared, like just doing it just because. I listen to the intuitive wisdom of my own feelings. I am guided from within. I really like this because recently, I had to come to a realization like there's a situation in my life going on where somebody really wants me to join them in their journey, and I just don't have a good feeling about it. And I don't have a good feeling about the person that like wants me to join them. I feel like that person is dealing with some other people that just don't have their best interests. And like every time this person brings it up to me, my stomach is in knots. And so like having to tell this person like I love you enough to let you explore that by yourself and I support you, but I just don't think this is going to end well with you. I don't have a good feeling about this. I don't have a good feeling about anything about this situation, but also too like this is your journey and you might just need to explore it for yourself. And like this person wants me to come along because I'm a safe space and I'm very very open to a lot of things, and I don't judge people at all. Like I'll let you do what you got to do, and we can process it later. And so, like, of course, this person wants me on this journey with them, but also too, like, I don't have a good feeling about it. And so, like, this card it says, I listen to my intuitive wisdom of my own feelings. Like the fact that my body gets into physical knots and my heart starts beating super fast every time this person brings up this certain situation just doesn't sit right with me. And the second part of the card says, I am guided from within. And I am. And I think for me, I have to start trusting myself and standing on business with myself. I can stand on business with everybody else, but when it comes to me, not so much. Okay, my patience is being rewarded. My turn will come. I believe this. I feel like I've been very patient. I feel like I've been doing the work, and I am starting to see things unfold, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, professionally, even physically. I'm starting to see things unfold. And I think like things just take time, and I think that's why it's important to be present. I give myself permission to switch off my mind and have some fun. I would like to say I'm there, but it's been a struggle. I almost feel guilty having fun because like life has just been so hard. And so like just really trying to figure that out. I believe it. Now am I gonna do it is a different thing. Okay, I soothe away anxiety and stress by choosing to do things that help me relax. I recently started floating. We're going to talk about that in the topic of the day, but I've just been doing things for me, doing things I want to do, finding things on the Eventbrite, going. There's a couple of friends that are kind of like on call, always down for the ride, calling them and just going. I have like a group of friends that we've been meeting on Fridays, which has been so dope. Um, and I think again, just letting go of the expectation that people are going to do it with me. So regardless if people there or not, like just to do it. So that's what I've been doing. And the last card, nothing is impossible for the heart. Love will always find a way. I have mixed emotions about this one. My thoughts on love have definitely changed. Um, I don't know that I'm in a season where I trust my heart, which is interesting. Um, but also on the other hand, I do think love will always find a way, whether that's your career, your spouse, whatever. I do think love will always find a way. I definitely think like self love finds its way because like you go through things, you have no choice but to love yourself. But but yeah, nothing is impossible for the heart. Love will always find a way. Um, I'm gonna speak that into existence. I don't know that I'm there in this season. So, anyways, that was an icebreaker. I feel like I needed every single one of those cards. Yeah, I needed every single one of those cards. So, anyways, we are gonna hop into the topic of the day. I will catch y'all over there. Whew. All right, welcome to episode 114's topic of the day. And today's topic is realities through grief. So, as I said in the intro earlier today, we are still working through 31 days of social work. Just since I had a couple of stumbling blocks, I just wanted to continue to educate people on social work and what that looks like. And I want to continue to be an advocate for the social work industry, especially like since I've been so affected by it. There's good and bad as everything in life, but also too like I really want people to like know what social work is and know that like what I want is I want people to stop limiting us. Okay, like I want people to stop limiting us what we can do. Social work is so broad, which is what makes it a very unique industry, but also to like the people in charge of the social work industry definitely needs to be challenged as well. And so I want to continue to talk about that. And so happy social work month, happy social worker appreciation. We in this thing. It is also my grief season. And so what that basically means is this is a season where a major loss was taken. So April 12th of 2007, I lost my father. And just ever since then, I've been trying to understand myself and my grief season. I was so young when I lost my dad. I was only 15 and he was dropping me off at work. I had just spent 2 days with him. So him and my mom are divorced. So they were divorced, and so they were split custody. It was 50-50. So like what that looked like was every other weekend I was with my dad, and then like Tuesday through Thursday, me and my little brother went with my dad. And that particular day, he died on a Thursday, and I know that because he dropped me off at school that day, and I was supposed to go home to my mom's house. And so what that had looked like was just trying to figure out like what that meant for me. And so like now that I'm turning 33 this year, I realize like not having a father, how it has affected me and how like it's affected me in a good way because I feel like I had a really good dad, to the best of his ability. And also too, I had a really open dad, which was, I don't think at the age of 15 I would have said that, but I think at the age of 33 from my memory. What I mean by open, like my dad was definitely an advocate for mental health. And I think he's probably the one that sparked it in me. Um and so yeah, and so just trying to figure that out, like life without a father has been pretty ridiculous. Also too, like it just goes to show you like that effect because my relationship with men haven't been the best. And like even like boyfriends of my mom who have like tried to come in and play the father role and they ghosted us too. And so like just my relationship with men, and I think like if we want to talk about like on a spiritual level, how that has even affected like my relationship with God too. Because like we tend to look at God as masculine, and so like when your relationship with masculine isn't the best, even though like I try to be this proactive self love advocate. I try to address things like the reality is like I have issues with the masculine because of things that I've been through, and I'm trying to work through that. Like, and I think like I'm in therapy, I'm doing things, I'm like, I'm doing all the work, but I don't think we talk enough about how you do all the work and like sometimes it just doesn't work. And I know I've said that on this show a millions of time. And so like as an adult, like I'm just realizing and like that really affected my relationship with God. Like I used to be a Jesus freak out, like a Jesus freak. And it's crazy because I'm recording this on Good Friday. Yeah, I'm recording this on Good Friday. And so that was a realization I think I had like 2 years ago driving. I was like crying. I'm like, God, like I just feel like my relationship with you is so distant and like could hear like a voice and be like, it's because of the masculine. Like I just don't trust that the masculine loves me or the masculine takes care of me. Like I just don't trust it. And so like, that's a personal issue. That's something that I gotta work through. I've been in therapy and I think I need to try different routes in therapy because like talk therapy just isn't working for me right now or ever. Um so like I need to like tap into that, like seriously tap into that. So but yeah, so like just figuring out like what the grief season is, and like grief seasons we typically get sad and we typically find ourselves on a downhill instead of an uphill. And so in the last couple of years I've been trying to like reverse that, and like in these grief seasons instead of like moping and being sad, like doing something in the memories, like going to coffee shops. My dad loved coffee, so like going to coffee shops, doing paint nights, I created the How I Feel nights, which on April 12th at the Healing Community Office we will be having a How I Feel night, which is basically an artistic night for grievers, for people who just need a release. And so I've tried to start doing things like that. So yeah, you'll be on this journey with me as I enter into that. That's fun. Okay. So if you've been listening to the show, you know that I went to the Millennial Social Work Conference and I attended a session with another grief expert, Kamisha Hayes, and she confirmed everything that I have been discussing, and I even learned more terms. This was really dope for me, and I've been wanting to talk about this for a while since going to the conference, but I just needed to like sit down and actually do it. So a couple of the terms that she gave was an- anticip- blah, 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 anticipatory grief, which grief is a natural emotional response to loss. Anticipatory grief is a feeling of grief or loss that are felt before the loss actually happens. People facing their own death or the death of the loved one may experience anticipatory grief. And this comes from the Health Directive 2021. Um, I really like this because when I think about the stages of grief and I think about death and dying, which in both my social work careers, like death and dying was a huge thing that we talked about. I really like this because when I read, I think I read in Grief is Love, the book, and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is like the creator of Death and Dying. And I read somewhere that she basically was like, it was really made for the person who was bedridden. So, like, the stages of grief were really made for like that person who knew they were dying. And so, like, the person knew they were dying. What made me think about this was I had piano lessons last Sunday, and one of my friends, and she comes every month, she was like, she has a family member that is essentially dying right in front of her. And she said that she was like, she's just dying, like she's physically dying, like we're watching her die. And I sat there and I was like, yeah, like I can think of a couple people that like I've either watched die or currently they're like dying in front of me. And so like anticipating what that grief is, I mean, anticipating what that feeling is going to be. And so like you're literally like grieving, but it's like anticipating grief. And so like it's something that we don't talk about. We can say live in the moment, do this, do that, but like when you're watching somebody that you know is no longer going to be here, like that's anticipation, and that does a lot to our bodies, our hearts, our souls, especially if these are people that we absolutely love and adore. Like we have to stop being robotic in life. We have to stop being one of the cards said, give yourself permission to have fun. And I think that's absolutely true. But also too, like we need to address what's actually holding us down. Another term that I learned was disenfranchised grief, which actually I kind of thought this was like grief beyond death, right? Like this is the grief that's not death. So this definition is a loss that is not openly acknowledged, socially violates or publicly mourned, or other words, a loss where society itself fails the griever by simply not recognizing their right to grieve. So in the session, what we talked about was like if you're having an affair in your marriage and your lover dies, that's still grief. Maybe you can't tell your spouse. And this is not to say whether it's cheating or wrong. No, we're talking specifically about the grief. Um, I talked about how on one of the episodes with the guest, how when I asked my question, I said, "Can you name a time that you grieved and how'd you get through it?" And the person said, I'm grieving myself. I'm grieving my old self. Pet loss, job loss. These are all things that we talk about in like grief beyond death. And like there's a term, like there's a professional term to this, disenfranchised grief. And basically it's anything that society wouldn't deem as something that's grievable. So society doesn't give us the chance to grieve, which is how freaking Healing She Got Faith was even created. So I was super excited to learn there's a professional word for what I've been doing. Um, and I just thought like that was really good to know and be able to educate you all too. This is another reason why it's important to have social workers, like because in this, like these are social workers who are finding these terms. These are social workers who are doing these studies. These are social workers who are doing these things. These are people who are servicing the community and the need and filling it up. So that's just a couple of fun facts. I want to come here and talk to y'all today, though. Mama, get real comfortable. Let me move this pillow because it is not making me comfortable. Okay, so in December, my best friend called me and was like, he was just grieving like life. He was emotional. He was grieving his grandfather. He just had a lot going on. And he texted me. Me and him were texters, but really like I just fly to him, pull up, and it is what it is. But we're not really phone people. But he was really down. And so I was talking to him and he was just grieving. He was grieving everything about his life. Like, yeah, grandpa, but also too like his career, his just everything he thought he would have, he just didn't have it. So it was a lot of grief. It was a lot of grief going on. So we talked through it and he's been cool. He's in a total transformation. Well, the other day I had a moment. And when I say I had a moment, y'all, like I felt like I was having a manic episode. Like I freaking lost it. And so I text 3 people, and I text them. I was like 3:40 in the morning, and I text them all. I was like, "Hey, if you just have so happen to be up, please call me." One of them, I was like, "Hey, if you just so happen to be up, can I please come over?" I mean, yeah, I cried. My anxiety was so high. So about 6 o'clock the next morning, the one person was like, "Yeah, come on over. We're free until 10." Excuse me. And so another person, she prayed over me, and then my best friend I called. And I could see the difference in his healing, because from like when we talked in December to now, because there's been a lot of awakening moments, and there's been a lot of truth. And one of the things he said to me was that I am on 2 different pages with some of the people that I yearn for a connection for so bad. And I am on 2 different pages. And I have to be accepting of that. And in that moment, I realized I am grieving these relationships. I preach all day, every day about transitioning, about growing, about being a different person, about doing this. And now that I'm going through it, I'm really struggling to accept it, like to be in acceptance of these things. I am I'm coming to a term where like I'm accepting myself for who I am. And so like being on 2 different pages with people, like you guys could want the same thing, but you want it in different ways. And I am at that point where I'm like, one thing that I've always struggled with is like people have always told me like you're way too emotional, you cry too much, you do this. And one of my biggest struggles in life is like I'm able to accept everybody for who they are, but when it comes to me, people struggle. And then the other parts of that is people will do things for me thinking it's what I want, but I don't see it. Like I don't see it that way. Like they're doing what they think I want them to do, but I don't see it that way. I still see it as like being selfish and being neglected and all that type of stuff. And one of the things that I learned in therapy in my family origin is that like I was always like I was always just so dramatic and crying, and so like that annoyed my family. That put like they hated dealing with me. I was always throwing a tantrum. I was always crying. I was always yelling. I was always like, I was just this different person, and it was hard for them to deal with. And so now I'm older and I'm in situations where that feeling is coming back because people are like, oh, you're so dramatic. Oh, you're this. Oh, don't take it too seriously. Oh, you're thinking too deep. Like, I'm just not accepted. Like, oh my gosh. And so, like, having to be like, yeah, like, this is just who I am. And if it doesn't work for you, that's fine. We're just not compatible no more, and that's okay. And having to be that way, like even to the point where like people recently been telling me you're so dramatic, so now I just don't say nothing. And now they're like, okay, well, you're not really talking. And I'm like, I can't. I don't have anything to give, because when I say stuff, it's annoying, but then you still come to me. And so like we have to set that boundary with each other. Like, this is who you are, this is who I am. I am not in beef with anybody right now. I am just in a season of this is who I am, and I don't know that you can accept who I am. And that's really what it comes down to. In this transition with relationships, I've gotten really close to some people. I've gotten really far from some people. And there's some close friends who have really been like, you're distant. And like having to have the conversation like, hey, like I am distant because I don't want to be on my phone. Y'all send me TikToks all day. I don't want to sit up here and watch TikToks all day. Like, I don't want to. I don't freaking want to. Just to be quite honest, like nothing about that is appealing to me. Like I don't want to. Um, I don't want to sit up here and watch TikToks all day. Also, too, I don't want to text you. Like having to realize like I lose half of my creativity because I'm sitting here texting all day long. Like, stop texting me. Like one of my friends, like she always asks questions, and I'm like, I almost said her name. I'm like, listen, I can't. I don't have the capacity to answer your question right now. Like, I do not have the capacity, and like I'm working on stuff. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. Like, I don't have time to text, and like just being honest and like, I keep saying I need quality time. Y'all either gonna do it or you're not gonna do it. I'm no longer gonna make time for people. Like I've been doing it for so long. I've just been doing it for so long. And so I'm just done. I'm just done with that. My career. Yeah, there was a time where you couldn't tell me that I wasn't gonna be in a nonprofit in a school working with students. There wasn't a time that you couldn't tell me. And this last summer when I worked with this middle school nonprofit, it was a fairly new nonprofit, and I started to realize this isn't what I want to do. I don't want to do this. No, I don't want to do direct service. Yeah, I have a whole facility and a whole organization based off of direct services, and realizing like I don't want to do direct service. So now what does that look like for me? And then having a realization, because I got my first writing client in 2024. And I love this client. We're working on her book, and like she is just so hungry, and I love it. I love it. And so stuff like that gives me motivation, but also in that I am learning um that I'll do direct services only if I have complete control, only if it's stuff that I actually enjoy. But like working for a job, I no longer want to do like solo work. I'm tired of being the only person running everything. I want to do certain things. And so I'm grieving that. Like there was a time where you couldn't tell me I wasn't going to be working with high school kids or doing this and that. And now that I'm there, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm really not doing this. Like this is so crazy to me. And so that has been interesting. That has been really interesting. And that's also like a hard transition too, because there was a time where you really couldn't like not see me doing this type of work, and now I'm just ready to transition out. I honestly think a lot of this is like feeling the effects of burnout throughout my life, like from people, careers, relationships. I practice self care, but also I've always struggled with like gratitude and boundaries. And those two things have always been my downfall, because like I'm not a stickler to setting a boundary with myself. And also, too, like I have always struggled with just showing gratitude for like the simple things. And the minute I can grasp those two concepts, I think I'll be okay. Um, Now that I have like real boundaries in place, like such as a bedtime, not so much time on the phone, not going out when I don't want to, um, not planning things, everything is taking a shift. And I'm grieving a lot of stuff. I'm also seeing a lot of transitions. I'm also seeing a lot of other stuff. And so a lot of things a lot of things are just shifting, and I'm grieving, and I'm excited, but I'm also sad, and it's just a lot. I feel like I know there are certain things that I have to let go, and I'm struggling so much with letting go because of grief. I don't want to feel it. I don't, and I'm gonna just be honest when I say that. Like my body goes into shock with change. Like anxiety, heart pumping, stomach hurting. I'm pooping all the time. Like I'm shaking. Like there's so much that goes into it. And like the prayer I've been having is like, I just don't want to feel like, if I'm gonna go, like, can I go through this without feeling the physical pains? Because I don't want to not be able to function. Like I need to be able to function. But they also say like when you pray for something, you're just not going to get it. Like you have to go through it and learn through it. And so I feel like that's just what I am learning, like what I can do. Because like the day I was having that like episode, I got up and I said, I do not want to lose sleep over this. I do not want to trip off of this. I do not want to be so quote unquote dramatic over this. And I promise you, y'all, I went to sleep like within 15 minutes. I only slept for an hour, but I went to sleep. I did like wake up in a, but nevertheless, like I was able to like stop crying, feel better, look the situation in the face and be like, this is where we're at. This is what it is. I am hurt, but I refuse to be distraught over it. And so I think like just stepping into that power. Um, I recently added floating therapy to my self care. So that day I had that episode, I was just on Instagram and somebody had put that they were at Float STL. And so I was like, let me just book this because I actually had stopped seeing my therapy. I put my therapy membership on hold because I just wasn't feeling like it was working, and then also too like money's just been tight. And so I was like, let me just see like what I can do. And so I started doing flow therapy, and it has been so amazing. Yeah, it has been so amazing. I went, enjoyed it, and then I went back the next day. Floating just gives me the permission to actually sit with my thoughts and be where I need to be. Like, I feel like I've been needing a space like this where I'm just like quiet with myself. Nobody's around. I'm not doing too much of anything. I'm literally like just doing what I need to do. And that's what float therapy has given me. And so it's definitely became part of my regimen. I've been like telling everybody about it too. Like, you have to do this, you got to do that. I do want to try it with some friends, but also too, like, this is just something like the first day I went, I like text people and was like, hey, like, I'm trying this thing. If you're interested, like, here's a referral code. Da, da, da. And then I was like, I'm just going to do this. When people are ready, they'll let me know. And it would just be that because it's just something I needed. I think like the hardest part right now for me is like I know what to do. I know what I need to let go of, but I haven't. But I want to say this with that because I feel like a lot of us need to hear that. When we are tired, it will happen. I think a lot of times we put pressure on ourselves, like, oh, I know I should leave the situation. I know I should leave this job. I know I should do this. And I get it. And sometimes we're just simply not ready to let go. But when you are ready, you will leave whatever the situation is. This might sound so weird or not relatable, but when I was in my master's in social work grads program, I, I did a project for about 6 weeks where I worked with a group of people who serviced sex workers on the street. And so what that looked like was we had a meetup spot where like all the sex workers would be, and we would give out purses, hygiene products, and then we also had resources. Within the 6 weeks, I think we got like 3 people off the street, which was really cool to experience. There was a house with a bunch of sex workers, and they knew about the group that I was with. And so like one day they came, and one girl, she was beat up, like her wrist was wrapped up, her face, like all of that. And I'm just sitting there, I'm sitting next to the leader, and she said something to the lady. She was like, I love when you guys get tired. So the leader said something to one of the sex worker that had like all, she was beat up. She said, I love when you all get tired, because when you get tired, you start coming to me and I'm able to assist you. But I have to be patient and wait for you because it's not going to happen on my time. But when you are ready, I'll be here. That changed my whole perspective on relationships with people because she was teaching me in that moment that, like, of course we want them off the street. Of course we want them off drugs. Of course we want them to be healthy and safe. And some of these workers are not safe. Some of these workers are not in the most safe position, right? And some of them are fighting for their life. And she was so patient and loving with that person. And she was just like, I just love when y'all get tired because you start coming and getting the resource. And like she was telling me after the lady had got her bag and left, she was telling me, she was like, I have sat here week after week, and there's some women that it takes them 6 months to finally like transition out of a dangerous situation. But when they start getting tired because they start coming, they start talking, and you just start to see, and it's a slow process. Like I read in a book the other day while I was at floating. Oh man, I don't even think I have the screenshot, but it basically said, don't be distraught if you fall into bad habits. Acknowledge the thought of acknowledging that you're even repeating a cycle is the beginning steps of moving forward. Yeah, that blew my mind because it was literally talking about like, don't be distraught for like having your old ways or having bad habits or things like that. The fact that you can even acknowledge and show emotion to the fact that like, dang, I'm doing this again is proof that you're healing and moving forward, because there was a time where you couldn't even acknowledge that you didn't like this or this wasn't healthy for you. But the fact that you are, and it might take you a long time to realize that. And I want you to hear and I want you to know that it is okay. It is okay. We have so many expectations in society. This person telling you to do this, that person telling you to do this. There's an expectation of love, there's an expectation of career, there's an expectation of money, there's an expectation. Everybody is a freaking expert on what they are doing. Everybody done got a Facebook and Instagram and TikTok degree. Like everybody is a life coach. Like I get it, but like what I'm learning in my journey is I really got to stand on business with myself and I really got to be open to myself. And that's what I'm learning. And that's like what I got to stick to. If I fall into a bad habit, such as like not working out again or going out to eat too much or whatever, going to a friend that keeps hurting me. The fact that like every time I do it, I'm like, dang, like I get tired. Like that's still proof of, okay, I'm still moving in the right direction. It really isn't going to happen overnight, but there's going to be a day where you'll realize like, oh, I did stop that. So, um, yeah, so ever since I started floating, like that has allowed me to clear my mind and realize a lot of these things. I know I have complained a lot in the past about like not having time, but recently I realized I can do whatever I want when I just do what I want, especially when I just let the expectation go of everybody else. And my final realization is just like there is grief in transition. There's grief in realization. There's grief in transition. Like being in a transitional season that is very uncomfortable, and that's where I'm at. I'm just very uncomfortable. And there's grief in there because I'm grieving being comfortable. But there's grief in transition, and that's okay. It's pushing us to where we need to be. So that's today's episode. I will go ahead and end on an affirmation as always. Thank you for listening. I'll see you over there. All right, welcome to episode 114's affirmation. I want to just say thank you for listening to this episode. I know that like sometimes it can be heavy, sometimes it's funny, but like the reality is like that's what this space was created for. So if you made it this far, I want to say thank you. So we always end on affirmation. So today's affirmation is I am allowed to blossom and be who I am created to be. I think this is so powerful in knowing that like we have the power to literally do whatever we want. And let me say this because I've been that person for so many years. I struggle with like how, and it really does take time. It takes gradual time to get to this point, and giving yourself grace and things of that nature. Like it really does take time. Um, and when you get there, realizing that you always have permission to do it, but it just you just needed the time to figure that out. So give yourself grace. Like give yourself grace. So our affirmation is I am allowed to blossom and be who I'm created to be. And yes, you are. You are allowed to be all of that. Okay? All right, y'all. I love you, but love you the way you love the world. I'll catch y'all next Monday.